Hey guys, so in this video, we're going to be putting our Django project up on a live server so we can access this website from anywhere in the world just by typing in the domain into the browser. So for our server, we're going to use Heroku and we're going to set up an account right now and then actually launch that Django app onto Heroku. So if you don't have a Heroku server or Heroku account, go ahead and just Google up Heroku. You can find them in the first link here. Set up an account, and at this point I don't think you need a credit card. I didn't set one up and it let me do this, so go ahead and create an account if you don't have one. So I'm going to show you two different methods to launch a Django site onto Heroku. So the first method, or the default method, is usually to just use the Heroku CLI, but I'm going to try to make this even simpler and use the Git method. So this is basically putting our Git or our website onto a GitHub repository, so a private GitHub repository, and then connecting it to a Heroku app. And this personally seems more native for me, so I'm going to start with that. And just to get going here, what I'm going to do is, once we're logged in, is we're going to create a new app within Heroku. So we're going to need to give our app a name, and this needs to be unique. So if anyone else with a Heroku account has this, it won't let you do this. So I'm going to use Dennis Ivy CRM1. So this may take a few tries. So this is available. We'll just go ahead and create app. So this is going to give us a project within Heroku. So if we go back to our main dashboard, we'll see our app appear here. So once we're here, we can just go ahead and open the app. So this is my app settings, and we're going to work within these tabs here, but we can open up the app, and this is going to give us that default page here that says, hey, this app is live. This is actually accessible from anywhere in the world. If you just type in that domain, I'll probably take it down by the time this video is up, but this is a working project. So what we're going to do is actually upload our Django project and replace this, so we'll be able to see our project that we built. Or if you're coming here from another video, you're just trying to launch yours, you'll be able to put your project up on here. So what we're going to do now is download, first we're going to download Git. So if you already have Git, you probably do. If you don't, go ahead and just download it. And then we need to download the Heroku CLI. So this is just going to give us the Heroku commands that we can work with within our command prompt on our local computer. So go ahead and find this and then choose the download that you need. So if you're a Mac, use this one. I use the Windows 64-bit installer, and this is going to give us that installer. And then once that's ready, we can go ahead and just run through that process, download the Heroku CLI, which I already have. So I'm going to stop this installation process, but go ahead and set that up. So once you have the Heroku CLI installed, we can actually go to our command prompt and just do something like this. We'll just do Heroku and then log in. And this will just log us into whatever Heroku account that we're currently set up with. So it's probably going to open this up in my other window here. So I'll drag this in. I have two screens open, but give it a minute. Go ahead and hit enter. And what we're going to see is this page. Okay, perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So we're going to see this page pop up, and if we just go ahead and hit login, this will log in our command prompt into Heroku. So once we're logged in, it tells us we can close this and we can start working with Heroku commands. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and tap into this project here. So we want to find Dennis Ivy-CRM. So in order to connect to that, we're going to do Heroku git and then remote -a and then our project name. So mine was Dennis Ivy-CRM1, and I spelled Heroku wrong, so give me a second to fix that. Okay, so we're now connected, and just to confirm that, it lets us know where that Git repository is. We can just do git-v, and actually it's git-remote, and that'll let us know which project we're in. And let me just confirm that one more time. So it's git remote-v, and there we go. So it lets us know that we're tapped into this. So if we have multiple projects, that's how we can switch in between. And if we want to create a new project directly from the command line, we can do Heroku create and then give this a name. So I'll just call this Dennis testing. And what this is going to do is actually create a new project for us up on Heroku. So if I actually, it tells us it's created, if I refresh this, we're going to see a new app in here. So we can create it either just by doing new and create or directly from the command line. So let's go ahead and make sure we're in the right project. So git remote-v, and we want to be within Dennis Ivy-CRM. So that does it for the CLI for now. So I'm going to minimize this, but just make sure you're within the right app in your Heroku project. So I'm going to minimize all of this and open up my Django project. And I did set up a virtual environment right within my Django app, and I currently have it active. And once I set up that fresh environment, I just ran the pip installs that my project needs. So if you're part of my Django crash course and you're trying to launch the same exact app, these are the requirements so far. So we have Django, Django filter, Django storages for anyone that used the S3 buckets, Boto 3 for the S3 buckets, and Pillow. And that's all we have for now. So those are installed into my virtual environment. And at this point, I need to install two more things. So we're going to install gUnicorn, and I'll explain these in a second. So gUnicorn, and we're going to install White Noise. And I can just go ahead and just chain these, but you could do them individually. So we're going to install these. And once we have these pip installs, what we need to do now is set up the required files that Heroku needs. So Heroku has a minimal requirement for these files, and one of those is a requirements.txt file. And what this does is basically let us know, or lets Heroku know, which requirements or which libraries do we need to work to make this project work. So let me just show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to do pip freeze and then angle bracket requirements.txt. So what this is going to do is create this requirements.txt file, and it's going to throw in the name of all these packages that our project requires. So if we have a certain third-party package like Django, gUnicorn, White Noise, what it's going to do, and I'll just go ahead and run it, it went ahead and created this file. And if we run this again later on, if it sees this file, it's actually going to go ahead and it's not going to recreate it. It's just going to add in our new requirements. And let me try to explain this one more time because I don't feel like my first explanation was right. So when we upload to Heroku, Heroku needs to know which dependencies this project needs. So it's going to look into the requirements.txt file and go ahead and download everything in here to make our project work. So if I pull up the Heroku documentation, I'll just read you the description. So when you deploy to Heroku, the dependencies you specify in your requirements.txt file are automatically installed before you start up your app. So basically, Heroku is going to go ahead, look in here, and set everything up for us. And this is why we need this file. So I hope that makes sense. The next file we're going to need to add is going to be runtime.txt. And this is just telling Heroku, I'm going to save this, .txt. And this is just telling Heroku which version of Python we want it to use. So I believe if we don't specify this, it's going to use the latest, but honestly, I don't really remember. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the method that I know is safest. And we are using Python version 3.81. So 0.81. And that just tells Heroku it's going to look into our runtime file and know to use Python 3.81. So now we're going to add a file called procfile, and I'll explain this in a second, but just do procfile with no extension. So the Heroku documentation clearly specifies do not add a .txt extension or anything like that. And I'll just bring in the docs to this, which I will link up in the description. So a procfile basically runs at the beginning, so whenever our app is launched, and we're going to connect it to our WSGI server there. So this is more of a Heroku thing. I'm not going to try to explain it, but I'll just go ahead and write out what we're going to set up into it, and I recommend you read into that later. So we're going to specify a process type. This is a Heroku thing, and we're going to do web, and we're going to use gUnicorn or Gunicorn, however you want to say that. I actually don't know. So gUnicorn, and we're going to do CRM1. So whatever we called our project or wherever your WSGI file is sitting. So mine is in CRM1 WSGI. So CRM1.WSGI, and we're going to do --log -file, and we'll close it out with a dash. So that's our procfile. Make sure you have that properly configured and you have gUnicorn installed and in your requirements.txt, and you ran that pip install. That's very important because it is going to go ahead and start up our app using this right here. So in our settings.py file, I'm going to go ahead and just close these out. We need to specify a few more things. So I want this app to run on my local server and on my Heroku server. So if I go here and find that domain, so Dennis IV CRM1, we're going to open up that app and grab this domain to it. So we're just going to get everything here. And we're going to tell our project to allow this domain to point to our site. And we're going to remove that / and this. And I also want my app to work with my local server. So we're just going to go ahead and allow that too, because if now if I run my app on my local server, it's going to give me an error and say this is not an allowed host. So we're just going to paste that in and remove 8000, and we'll remove that HTTP. So we have that set, and we are also going to set debug to false for now because we are putting this up on our server. And on Heroku, we need to go to our app and we need to specify build pack. So within the setting tab, we need to let Heroku know which language we're working within because it won't deploy without this. So we just need to specify Python and save that, and that'll run once we deploy our project. So if we go back to settings, for those of you part of the series, I did revert back to SQLite for now, and we're not using S3 anymore if you happen to be using that. So we're gonna have everything be served from our Django project. So let's go ahead and open up GitHub and actually create a Git repository for our app here. So let's go ahead and create a new one. So we'll just do create new app. And in here, we're just going to call this CRM-live. And we're going to set that to private and initialize a README file and go ahead and create that repository. So I mentioned that there were 2 ways to deploy this. So the first one is going to be with GitHub. So the Heroku CLI, GitHub, and I've never used this method, but we're going to use GitHub. So what we need to do is connect to our GitHub repository. So it's already connected to mine, and we need to find this repo name. So if I do a search for CRM, and we'll just do that, and I have a few of these. So there's the one that I have the source code with, but we want to do CRM live. So we're connecting to this empty GitHub repository right here, and we're not going to deploy it just yet. So to deploy it, we just go ahead and hit deploy from the master branch. But what I'm going to do now is actually upload our project to GitHub. So if we grab our project and let me close this stuff out. If we get our project from here, we're going to go straight for the source code. And I am going to ignore that virtual environment for now. Actually, we never want to upload that, at least at this point. What I'm going to do is drag the files directly into the root. So this is going to take a minute, but those files are going to transfer. And once they're transferred, we'll actually push it live. So let's just go ahead and give this a minute. And normally you'd want to use this, you'd want to do this with a command prompt and, push it that way. So if you know GitHub, you should already understand that. But I'm just dragging it in like this just to show you the process of it and not go through the details of how Git works because that's not the point of this tutorial. So we're just dragging the files in. Okay, so our projects are now in our Git repository. So what we can do is actually go ahead and deploy it from here. So we're connected to our Git repository, to that account here, and we're going off of the master branch. So in GitHub, we have branches, and we're going off the master, which we can change later. And we're just going to go ahead and deploy that. So I'm purposely leaving a few things out right now because we should get a couple of errors that I want to debug along with you. So let's go ahead and watch this go through, and it's going to start the build process of actually deploying our app. So if I go ahead and open the app up, I'll open it up in another tab here. We're going to see it appear here soon. So let's go ahead and watch this. Okay, so we got the first error, and what's happening here is Django is not, or Heroku doesn't serve static files for us. So what it's trying to do is run this collect static command. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll probably cover that in another video, but collect static just basically bunches up our static files and has a different way to serve them. And what Heroku is trying to do is on push, during that push, it's trying to run collect static, but we never set a static root. So it's trying to run that, but it's giving us an error. So it's suggesting for now that we turn them off. Well, we don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do, because I do want our static files served, is we want to configure the static root. So just above our media URL, we have our media root, but now we need to set our static root. So let's go ahead and just type that out. So that's static _root. And I'm going to copy from here. So os.path.join base dir, and we're just going to call this static files. And I'll explain in a second what's going on here. So static files. So what's happening is anytime we run python manage.py collect static, all of our static files are going to go into that static files folder. So this folder will actually get created and all of our static files will be thrown in there. And if we're using S3 buckets, what happens is when we run collect static, all of our static files will be sent up to AWS S3. So that's what Heroku's trying to do for us right now. So when we set this static root, Heroku is going to go ahead and run collect static, and it needs to know where to put this. So that's going to fix this error for us. So it's no longer going to tell us to do this. And we're also going to use white noise because Heroku still doesn't know how to serve static files. So white noise is going to help us serve these. So that's why we ran pip install, and within our middleware, we need to throw in this right here. So white noise, middleware, and we're going to throw that into settings. Right, where was that middleware list? I'll just put that up here. So traditionally, I've actually seen people put it underneath the security. I don't know if I've noticed a difference there. So now that I have this, let's go ahead and re-push these files, merge them, and then actually fix this error for ourselves. So I'm going to go up to GitHub, and I'm going to create a new repository, and we'll just say white noise. And for anybody I had a couple of questions of people asking, how do you update a project after you push it? Well, this is how we would do it if we were using GitHub. So we create a new branch, and we're going to go to that branch. And as long as we're within that branch we just created, we're going to re-upload the files. Again, you'd normally do this from your command prompt, but we just made the edits in our settings.py file, so we want those to be reflected. So what I'm going to do is grab those same files, and we're going to remove that env file because that's going to be too much for us to drag in. We'll give this a few seconds. Actually this will take a couple of minutes, but once this gets thrown up on GitHub in a new branch, we're going to go ahead and remerge it with our master branch and then upload it, and then that error should be fixed. Okay, so now that branch is up there, let's go ahead and merge this new branch with that master branch because that's where we're serving our files from. So white noise will now be merged with master, and those changes should reflect. So it showed where we made those changes. Let's go ahead and create the pull request. And again, I'm showing this just because if you already understand GitHub, this should all make sense to you. I'm just trying to show anybody new on how to redeploy to Heroku. So once we committed those changes should be reflected in our master branch. So we can go ahead and just hit deploy branch. Now, one thing about this, if we select automatic deploys, this should configure it to where anytime we make a new push to master, we don't have to click deploy here. It should automatically deploy itself. So let's go ahead and see if that collect static issue goes away. So let's give it a second. So it looks like collect static is running correctly now. Okay, so the branch deployed, and we can view our app on that URL now. And here we go. So our website is now on Heroku and accessible from anywhere just by typing in that domain. So let's go ahead and see if those static files work. So we'll log into our main profile. All of our static assets look good. And if I do /admin, the admin panel also looks good. So perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So the next method, if you're not familiar with Git and everything I just did, basically we're going to go back into the steps right up until deploying it with GitHub, and we are now going to use the Heroku CLI. So I'll actually create another project and we'll just reconfigure it really quick because our files in our Django project are already set up. So we'll just show you how to use the Heroku CLI to deploy this. Before we launch with our CLI, I wanted to show you this error that everyone seems to always get, and you're most likely going to have this at some point in your launch process. So basically what this is you try to open up your application and something didn't work and Heroku throws this error. So it's not a standard 404 error. It's going to tell you something else. So what's happening here is something went wrong during deployment. So what you can do is actually within your Heroku CLI. So let's go ahead, and I'm actually logged in. So we'll just do we'll actually do exactly what it says here. So we'll just write in Heroku logs dash dash tail. So Heroku logs dash dash tail. And I actually don't have an error at this point, and that's tail, not tails. I don't have an error at this point, but I'm just going to show you what happens. So whenever you type this in, it's going to show you the log files to what was going on when your app was being launched. So you're going to be able to read through this right here and see where that error occurred. So it's a lot to read over at first, but it's a good way to figure out what went wrong. I don't have an example for you right now because we didn't run into anything, but remember to run that command from your CLI. So let's go ahead and close this out. So I just pulled up an image from Google. Let's go ahead and close it out and actually start working with our project. So I'll close this out with Control C and terminate that. And let's go ahead and clear this, do test and CLS there. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you're logged in. So Heroku login, I'm logged in, but I just want to make sure you remember to do this because this will throw an error. Go ahead and hit enter and wait for that pop-up to occur. And we can log in by clicking that. And again, this will tell us our window can now be closed. So let's go ahead and create a new project. So we'll do Heroku create, and we'll just do CRM live dash CLI because we're using the Heroku CLI. Let's see if that's a real name that we can use. Okay, so that worked, and let's go ahead and tap into that name. So we'll just do Heroku or that Git repository, Git, and we'll just do remote dash A and then the app name, which was CRM live dash CLI. And that should connect us. So just to confirm that, we'll do git dash remote dash V. Okay, so we're in there, and if you look at our GitHub repository, I actually closed out those other two projects, or the other project that we had, and we have the one we just launched with Git, and we have the new one. So if we open up the app, it's currently just a blank app at this point. So let's go ahead and start configuring things. So we'll open up our command prompt, and the first thing I'll do is git init. So we just want to initialize it, and we'll do git status. So I'm working within my virtual environment, so I want to make sure everything's set up right. So let's go ahead and actually ignore this env. So remember when I dragged it into our GitHub account, I didn't drag these files in. So that's a lot to drag in. So what we're going to do, and later on we're going to do this to ignore our SQLite database, we're going to create a new file, and it's going to be called .git ignore. And in here, we just want to ignore that env file. So we'll just do env / and that should now ignore it on push. So let's go back in here, and right there we see that env file. So let's just do git status, and now we don't see it, so it won't be pushed. And let's actually go ahead and ignore that too. So we'll just do __, and there's good documentation on what to ignore, but I won't cover that right now. So we'll just make sure we'll just ignore what we need at this point, _/, and then we can do git status, and that should be gone now. And now let's go ahead and just do git add, and then we'll do git commit, and this will just be our first commit. So -m, and we're going to put a note, and we'll just say our first commit. So the reason I'm able to do this is because I'm actually in the project that I want to push to my new Heroku app. So I'm in CRM1, so I'm running all these commands from there. So when we create it and we start pushing, it's going to take everything from this this local project. So we did git commit, and I'll just check status again, and everything looks ready. So now we can push to our master, which is that repository that we just created. It's git push Heroku and master. And that should just grab all of these files and push that into our new project. So let's just give it a second. And remember that we already configured our proc file, requirements.txt, and runtime. So all those are being pushed, so we shouldn't really get any errors at this point. And this is actually a perfect teaching opportunity here because I realized we never changed our allowed host. So we're still pointing to that other project. So we had the 2, and I want to point to the new one, and I also want to set up the build packs. Actually, I realized the build packs were set up already. So we want to point to this domain. So when we open it up right now, we're actually going to get an error. And what this is allowing me to teach you is how to re-push something after change. So once we change allowed host here, let's go ahead and just update that. Remove all these. So once we change this, we need to go back into our command line and we'll just do git status. We'll see what's going on. So it says that we modified our settings.py file. So we'll just do git add and then dot. And just to check that, we'll just do git status again. And that tells us, okay, we modified it. Now we're ready for commit. So we'll do git commit -m, and our comment will be updated, or we'll just do allowed host. So that's just a comment for ourselves, and git push master. So we made an update and we can push it. Oh, it's Heroku. I always forget these commands. Git push Heroku master. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so that just launched my app live again, and that should fix everything. So let's go ahead and just wait for this to refresh. Okay, so that took care of everything. And at this point, we still have our SQLite database. So let me just make sure everything's working. Our static files are working. Okay, so in the next video, what we're gonna do is actually ignore our SQLite database and connect to a Heroku database. So within settings here, in our configuration variables, by default, we already get a Postgres database to work with. So Heroku already sets us up with it. It's not something you wanna use in production, but it is something we can use for now. So what I'm gonna do is show you how to connect to that and ignore the SQLite database. And then we did a video, a couple of videos back on how to put a database up on AWS. So we're actually gonna connect to that database that I created. So go ahead and stick around for that, and we'll make this more production level ready. And one more note, if right now, if we're loading up these sites, they're kind of slow at this point. What we can do is actually I'm not gonna make this a whole Heroku tutorial, but we can actually crank these up by paying for more dynos here. So at this point, our dyno type is free. So once we start upgrading, $7 a month, if I just upgrade to that, it's really gonna start enhancing our site, and our site will speed up, but I won't go into that. I'll probably just take care of that really quick in the next video, but that's it for now.